Chapter 34. The Resonance of Secrets. Chapter 34. The Resonance of Secrets. Since the reveal of the prophecy and their heart-to-heart, Harry and Severus' relationship changed yet again. They did not broach the topic again, but now Harry knew he had a silent protector in the castle in a way he had never before appreciated. Harry wasn't arrogant enough to believe he knew everything about the potion's master. No doubt, the brilliant wizard still had plenty of surprises left in store for Harry, but his basic motivations in regards to Harry, at least, were now out in the open. The term passed, and Harry enjoyed the luxury of just feeling, for the first time, like a somewhat normal teen. He studied in the library, he played Quidditch, he spent time with his friends twice a week. He and his expanded friend group met up in the room of requirement. After the initial introductions were over, he found they were really quite easy to talk to. Yule was fast approaching, and unlike previous years, Harry would not be staying at the castle alone. He would be accompanying Severus and Draco back to the manor for the entirety of the winter break. The idea of having somewhere to return to was novel and brought him a sense of comfort, even though he knew he couldn't let himself forget that Prince Manor wasn't actually his home. It was just a temporary place for him. Still, it was nice to pretend. But first, Harry had a Hogsmeade trip to look forward to, and it wasn't just any Hogsmeade trip, it was a Hogsmeade trip with Daphne. Harry felt his face warming up at the memory. She had looked uncharacteristically nervous when she'd asked him to accompany her, which he had found adorable. Over the last few months, Harry and the older Greengrass sister had gotten to know one another quite well, and as oblivious as Harry typically was, even he could see their friendship felt different from what he had with his other friends. For one thing, he couldn't get her out of his head. He would get excited and jittery at the thought of seeing her. Just the way she would turn to smile and wave at him in the great hall made his morning. He knew what that meant. He liked Daphne Greengrass a lot. And strangely, miraculously, she seemed to like him back. She was bold in ways he wasn't. She was the one, after all, who had taken his hand that day under the library table as they were studying together. One of the many things about her that Harry appreciated was her clear interest in him as a person. She had made it very clear she had absolutely zero interest in the boy who lived nonsense. When asked, she explained that her family had been staunchly neutral, had kept themselves out of the war, and had managed to stay out of Voldemort's clutches. They also didn't have a high opinion of the ministry, feeling them to be incompetent goons as a whole. Daphne seemed to be on a quest to get to know Harry in the most normal of ways, and their library study sessions would often end in her asking him unending questions about his likes and hopes for the future and thoughts about this and that. So much so that he felt he had come out of it knowing himself better than he ever had before. Was he planning to attend university after Hogwarts? He had never given it a thought before. He hadn't honestly counted on making it that far. But now he was starting to see that he did have hope for the future and that there were lots of exciting possibilities for what life after Hogwarts may look like. Daphne, as it turned out, was a musician. She played a fascinating instrument Harry had never heard of called a viola d'amore. Harry had had no idea that Hogwarts had a suite of music rooms in the dungeons, but it turned out that was the case, and Daph would spend a lot of her free time down there. Harry got up the nerve to ask if he could hear her play sometime. She had consented and had given him a private performance. After some quick warm-up scales, she had begun to really play, and as her fingers danced lightly across the instrument, misty images began to rise up and dance around them in time to the music, a visual echo of the pieces she played. A unicorn frolicking around when the music was light-hearted, a foreboding mountain range rising up around them when her music reached a climax. It was like nothing he had ever experienced. After that, Harry spent a good amount of time listening to her play. He found he loved it. And he was in awe of the way her hands strummed the strings, bringing magic into the room. If he hadn't already fallen for her, he knew these moments would have settled it. He was hook, link, and sinker. He confided in her about his life before Hogwarts, in a way he never had even with Ron and Hermione. And rather than pry, she simply listened and said she understood. She thanked him for trusting her, letting him know it meant a lot to her to understand his whole person, and everything that made him who he was, even those experiences he never should have had to endure. She told him flat out that she admired his resiliency and innate goodness to have come out of his experiences the wizard he was today. Her words had trailed off there, and she had turned quite pink. Harry's stomach was full of butterflies at what that seemed to mean. Daphne wasn't bold about everything. The war, for instance, gave her a lot of anxiety. Being in Slytherin House meant she was always close to it, surrounded by political talk that she despised. It also made her very nervous to think that Harry had a role in it at all. Harry had reassured her that his role was much reduced now, thanks to Severus. One day, Harry got up the nerve to ask her about the arranged marriage between Draco and Astoria and why she didn't have a similar arrangement. Daphne had visibly shrunk, but answered, explaining that she had been in one, actually, but the other family had turned out to have close Death Eater ties, and her parents had broken it off on her behalf. Even though it was for a good reason, she explained, a broken contract was a black mark on a pureblood witch, and it made it difficult to find another willing partner for a betrothal contract. Although she tried to downplay it, Harry could see that it had caused her a lot of anxiety in the past. She said she didn't care about the arranged aspect of it, but admitted she'd been worried she would never be able to find a willing marriage partner, that she would be rejected and treated as untrustworthy by any potential suitors. Harry had listened closely and made it clear that she was not silly for having let those problems bother her. She argued that her problems were so minor compared to those that Harry had to deal with that she was almost embarrassed to bring them up. But he insisted they were valid and expressed again that he was in her corner and that he was always there to listen if she ever had anything on her mind. Harry had just finished runes for the day, and he and Luna were chatting on their way down to the Great Hall. Suddenly, Luna tripped, seemingly over her own feet, and her school bag opened, spilling the contents all over the stone floor. "Luna, are you all right?" Harry immediately bent down to help his friend, but then he felt a harsh tug, and he was flung across the corridor, his back slamming against the rough stone wall, his glasses falling to the ground. Ugh! He looked up to see two seventh-year Slytherins, Cassius Warrington and Graham Montague, closing in on him. Luna was nowhere to be seen. "Warrington, Montague, what's this about? I'm afraid we have quite the bone to pick with you, Potter. You've really overstepped. Who do you think you are trying to poison our house with your do-gooder nonsense?" Harry sighed. He'd expected this sort of thing, but things had been relatively smooth recently, and he'd let his guard down. "I am happy to have a civil discussion on the matter," Harry said neutrally, "if you will let me down." His voice hardened. "But leave Luna out of this." "No can do, Potter. I'm not particularly interested in your blabbering. This way, you have to listen to us, and not the other way around." "Furthermore," Montague hissed, his wand pressing painfully into Harry's neck, his ugly face blocking Harry's entire line of vision, "we've noticed you've been spending a lot off time with Miss Greengrass. I don't remember hearing you ask permission from your betters to touch a pureblood witch with your unclean hands." "That's right, son of a mudblood," Warrington spat, and Harry grimaced as the spittle hit his cheek. "Daphne can make her own decisions about who she chooses to spend her time with." "Daphne," he says, "how dare you use the whore's first name? Damaged goods she may be, but her blood is still far too good for you." Suddenly, a roar of anger rushed to his head. "How dare they talk about Daphne that way? Don't you ever talk about her that way again," Harry hissed, doing a fair impression of the head of Slytherin. The two seventh years just laughed. "That would be much more frightening if you weren't outnumbered and stuck to a wall, blind as a bat." "Where are your glasses, Potter?" "Oh, here they are." Harry heard a horrible crunch as Montague stomped on his glasses, afterwards rubbing his shoe back and forth on them until they were hardly recognizable. "Okay, you guys have had your fun. Now let me down." "And where the hell is Luna?" The weirdo is not going to bother us. We've made sure of that. They grinned evilly. You bastards, what did you do? She won't be permanently damaged. Don't worry, Harry. I am fine. Harry and the bullies turned to see Luna standing there, her book bag back in order, and looking none the worse for the wear. Luna, while no one should have been able to find you for at least 48 hours, Montague yelled. Please do continue, gentlemen. By all means, explain how your childish prank on Miss Lovegood could actually be considered a threat to her life. You do realize that a witch or wizard cannot go longer than 3 days without water. Harry's heart leapt at the familiar, sinister, silky tones. He looked up to see the blurry image of a tall, dark, and menacing-looking wizard standing in the middle of the corridor. A short wave of Severus' hand and Harry's restraints disappeared. Harry felt himself gently float to the ground. Another wave of his hand, and Harry's broken glasses were repaired and fitted back on his face. Professor Snape, silence, the potion's master hissed, and the danger in his voice was so clear that the two senior Slytherins immediately seemed to shrink. Like a dark but growing shadow, Severus Snape closed in on the two, putting himself between them and his ward. Do not think you will get away with this behavior. His voice was a dangerous whisper, and it promised retribution if the boys did not listen. Friday as the sole exception, you will be spending every evening of the next 2 weeks with me. No excuses. Yowalalan under my tutelage. If you do not, I am afraid the consequences will be unpleasant. Warrington and Montague gulped. They had seen their head of house treat others, especially Gryffindors, harshly, but that had almost never been directed at them. They felt honestly a little betrayed, and their anger led to stupid mistakes. Why should we listen to you? We've all heard you're a traitor to the Dark Lord. And now you defend these light wizards against your own house. We were just having a bit of fun. You've always said how Potter needs to be taken down a peg. Warrington's tirade was cut off abruptly by the professor closing in even more until he was right before him, looking down at him with a very dangerous expression. Warrington was tall, but the professor was taller, and the close proximity made him incredibly intimidating. The two stood there in silence for the longest minute of Warrington's life. He could understand how the man had truly been a Death Eater at one time. Do not test me, Severus said dangerously. You have now increased your sentence to 3 weeks. Any more inane statements? He looked from one boy to the other. They both shook their heads. If that is the case, begone, he hissed. But do not forget my office tonight. 6 p.m. sharp. They clumsily gathered their belongings and were off down the hallway before anything else could be said. Severus sighed and then turned to Harry, his eyes searching him carefully. Are you injured? No, I'm fine. Severus looked dubious. What about your back? Oh, it's just a scratch. Severus used his wand to call a small jar of ointment to him and passed it to Harry anyway. Use this. Any lingering wounds, assuming they are indeed just scratches, should be taken care of. If you have any other pain, come to me. Thank you, sir. Harry accepted the jar. How did you get here so quickly? Your pendant, it not only acts as a way for you to warn me intentionally. If you are in danger of bodily harm, it alerts me as well. He paused. I realize that perhaps it would have behooved me to have informed you of this earlier. I made the change after rescuing you from the Dark Lord's clutches. Certainly in the past, Harry would have taken this as an invasion, a form of the professor spying on him, given that this was being done without his knowledge. And it did bother him that Severus hadn't thought to inform him at any point. Did he think Harry would have resisted the idea? But he knew Severus had his best interests at heart, and in any case, it was clearly a good idea, so he just nodded. Thank you for rescuing me, Professor Snape, Luna said dreamily. Certainly, Miss Lovegood. Have all your scrapes mended as expected? Yes, I feel perfectly fine now. You know, that is the fastest I have ever been rescued after being stuffed in a closet. Harry and Severus exchanged glances at that. That is fascinating. Might you share more? Who exactly has been responsible in the past for similar incidents? Harry smiled, watching Severus show true concern for Luna's chronic poor treatment at the hand of her classmates. Bullying at Hogwarts had always been such a normal part of life, with professors rarely interceding, that it was a nice change to see Severus taking a stand. Perhaps things would change for the better in that way as well. Harry had just finished cleaning up his workbench after potions class when he heard the professor call his name. "Mr. Potter, stay behind." "Yes, Professor." Severus closed and locked the door. "Harry, your work in class today was exceptional." Harry felt his face turning pink. "Ah, really? Am I right in assuming you used your own formulation of the draft?" "Yes, and I'm sorry for taking liberties in your class, but I had put a lot of thought into it, and both Hermione and Daphne thought it made sense. Given that it was clearly exceptionally well thought through, I cannot fault you. On the whole, however, I do not want you using untested potions methods in a full class of students." He paused. "If you would like, you may use my potions laboratory to practice, assuming you get my permission in advance." "Really?" "I mean, that would be great." Severus raised an eyebrow, not expecting such an enthusiastic response. Harry fidgeted, looking a bit nervous. "I was actually thinking that would be extremely helpful, but I didn't want you to feel I was asking for special treatment or anything. By now I know you well enough, Harry, to realize you never ask for special treatment. Quite the opposite, in fact." Harry smiled. It was a relief that he no longer had to explain himself to the professor at every turn. The wizard seemed to have a sixth sense these days when it came to all things Harry, understanding without him having to spell it out. What a difference a few months ago could make. "Well then, I take you up on your generous offer, Professor. We are in private, Harry. It is acceptable for you to speak to me more informally." "Ah, yeah, that's right. Thank you, Severus." When can I start? Are your classes over for the day?" Harry nodded. "If that is the case, why not start now?" "Oh, well, sure. Yeah, yes." Severus smirked. "How eloquent." "Oh, shush." Severus froze, looking genuinely shocked for a moment before quickly assuming a smirk. Harry's eyes were wide as he rushed to correct his faux pas. "Sorry, sir. I didn't mean to be rude. Believe it or not, I can have a bit of a sense of humor in select situations with select individuals. And I admit, Harry, that I do not mind that you have apparently grown comfortable in my presence to the extent that you are able to be somewhat humorous. That is to say, you have my permission to joke with me, assuming you don't turn into one of those Merlin-forsaken Weasley twins." Harry laughed. "Point taken, sir. Well then, shall we?" Severus led them to the next room, to his private laboratory adjoined to the main classroom. Harry had only ever been in the classroom laboratory. This was his first time seeing this room, and he immediately appreciated how well stocked and set up it was. "Anything in particular you wish to start with?" "Well, I had an alternative theory on today's draft. Do you mind if I pass it by you?" "Go ahead." Harry explained his idea. Severus poked holes in it, and then a few minutes later Harry was set up at his brewing station. Severus set out a cauldron and ingredients of his own beside Harry at the large workstation, and commenced with a potion as well. The silence between them was companionable, and Harry found it very easy to slip into the flow of potion making there, working beside his potion master. He also found once again that he truly enjoyed potions these days. At some point along the way, it had become a combination of the active meditation Severus had spoken of and an exhilarating art that welcomed experimentation and discovery. He said as much to Severus. Severus blinked. "That is gratifying to hear. I myself often feel the same, excepting those times when playing task course for the headmaster." Severus observed the boy. Harry had changed so much, or had he? Between the two, he knew his perceptions were what had changed the most, but certainly the boy before him was changed in a not insignificant way. Most notably, the way he held himself. The Harry he recalled from the past was constantly hunched over, tense, looking over his shoulders for ghosts. The Harry before him was different. His burden was clearly greatly lifted. Was it the removal of the Horcrux? The realization that he had some not small talent when it came to his studies? Or was it the knowledge that he had a solid group of friends in his corner? Perhaps it was all of the above. But in any case, Severus found himself marveling at the way the boy's hands moved without hesitation, smoothly, from one step to the next. Was he technically perfect? No, but he clearly had a natural talent now that it was let to blossom. Severus looked at his own stained, scarred hands, and then glanced back at Harry's unblemished ones. It gave him great satisfaction that there was no longer any evidence of the blood quill scar that had once marred the Gryffindor's hands. He also noted that Harry had, consciously or not, taken on some of his own mannerisms when it came to potion making. In fact, the way the young man's hands deftly handled the ingredients, the idiosyncratic flick of his wristed, was almost as if Severus were watching himself as a teenager, but not quite, a different, brighter version of himself. A boy he perhaps could have been had he been able to overcome the darkness that had stalked him his entire life. A strange, fierce protectiveness tightened in Severus's chest. Harry's hands were unblemished now. He wished to keep them that way. And he realized then that he didn't just want Harry to be a competent brewer. He wanted Harry to have the life of discovery that Severus had traded away for shadows. He wasn't just looking at a student, he was looking at a legacy he actually wanted to leave behind. Sir, Severus blinked. How could he have let his mind wander to such an extent? He glanced at his own potion, but happily the draught of living death was one he had made so many times he could literally complete it half asleep. The potion's master swallowed, his thoughts from a moment before having lodged a strange lump in his chest. He pulled his gaze up to meet Harry's concerned green orbs. Yes, Harry. I was going to ask you to test my potion, Severus. Severus nodded curtly, and casting a stasis charm on his own, moved to examine Harry's cauldron. The hue was spot on, as was the texture. He magically ladled some into a testing vial and akioed over another vial of a potion. He extracted just a drop to add to Harry's potion. With a puff of purple smoke, the potion shimmered before resuming its original state. Excellent, perfect stability. Well done, Harry. The smile on the boy's face lit up the room. Severus found that contributing to bringing such a smile to Harry's face was not unpleasant at all. It was the day of the Hogsmeade trip, and though they hadn't put a label on what was happening, Harry met Daphne in the entrance hall with a stomach full of butterflies. He took a moment to enjoy how beautiful she looked in her winter clothes, decked out like a snow queen in light blues and white. You look beautiful, he said, the words slipping out before he could second-guess them. She grinned, looking uncharacteristically shy. Thank you, but it's just my winter coat, hat, and muff. I'm not exactly dressed for a ball. Harry took a moment to indulge in imagining Daphne at a ball, then blinked as she laughed. Earth to Harry, shall we go? They spent the afternoon drifting away from the larger group. They avoided the crowded, pink chaos of Madame Pewterfoot's, opting instead for a small, subdued coffee shop with dark wood and the smell of roasted beans. It was miles better than any official date spot. It was casual and quiet, exactly their style. As they shared a small cake, Harry realized he'd never felt so comfortable in his own skin. There was no pressure to be the hero. As they walked back toward the carriages, the sun dipping low, they passed through a tunnel of enchanted lights. The atmosphere was heavy with everything they hadn't said yet. Harry stopped, turning to her. Daphne, I'm really glad we met. She looked up at him, her eyes bright in the fairy lights. I'm not going anywhere, Harry. She reached up, her hand brushing his cheek, and for a second the world stopped as she leaned in and gave him a quick, soft kiss. It wasn't a declaration of marriage, but it was a promisier first step. Harry walked back to the castle feeling supercharged. He wasn't sure what they were yet, but he knew he wanted to find out. On the train ride back to King's Cross for winter break, Harry shared a compartment with Draco, Hermione, Theo, Daphne, and the twins. In another were Ginny, Astoria, Neville, Luna, Tracy, Ron, and Blaise. The laughter between the two rooms was a constant backdrop to the journey. On the platform, as the steam from the Hogwarts Express swirled around them, the group began to say their goodbyes. Theo and Hermione were tucked away in a corner, Theo looking uncharacteristically pleased as Hermione spoke animatedly about a book she was lending him. Draco gave Astoria a little kiss on the cheek, squeezing her hand. "Try to stay out of trouble. That's my line," she shot back with a wink. Daphne turned to Harry, her smirk softening. "I'll miss our rune sessions, Potter." "I'll write," Harry promised, wrapping her in a brief, tight hug. "I promise." "You better," she whispered in his ear before stepping back. As Harry and Draco approached the shadows where Severus stood waiting, Harry felt a profound sense of peace. He finally had a place where he belonged among this strange quasi-family of Severus and Draco, with friends who saw him clearly, and a girl whose music was still echoing in his head. "Are you two ready?" Severus asked, his dark eyes scanning them for any sign of distress. "Yes, Severus." "Ready, Uncle Save." Severus nodded, a flicker of something like pride in his gaze, and sidelong apparated them back to the sanctuary of Prince Manor. "Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for reading." Chapter 35, Winter Break. Chapter 35, Winter Break were in the home stretch. Only a couple more chapters after this. They apparated onto the grounds in front of Prince Manor. Harry looked up at the tall ramparts and felt a swell in his chest. He hadn't realized how much he had missed this place. In vast contrast to Harry's feelings when he had first set foot there, this time it felt like coming home. "Severus, Harry, Draco, Tilly welcomes you home, sirs." "Thank you, Tilly." "Thanks, Tilly." "It's great to see you." In concert, Harry and Severus had stooped down onto one knee to be closer to eye level when greeting the head elf. The two wizards' gazes met in surprise at the extent to which they were in sync. They turned back to the elf. "How have you been?" "Nothing out of the ordinary, I take it." "All is well, Severus," the elf said, smiling. "That is good to hear. It's really good to see you, Tilly." "I'm glad to be back." "We are always glad to have you, Harry." After that, the three wizards made for their rooms to change into something more comfortable. They had a full 2 weeks, encompassing both Yule and New Year's, here at the manor. Their welcome home dinner was incredible. Tilly and the other elves were great chefs, and this time they had gone all out with what Severus explained were dishes from North India. "I have asked Tilly and the rest of the staff to take us on a tour of world cuisines while you are home this break. I imagine we'll make an exception for Yule and New Year's." "I take it neither of you have tried Indian food before." Harry and Draco responded that they hadn't, and Severus dove into an explanation of what they had before them. Essentially small sampler portions of a lot of different highlights: samosas, naan, biryani, navratan korma, saag paneer, tandoori chicken, and, then to finish it up, mango lassi. All three wizards were stuffed to the brim, but it was awesome and a great idea to spur conversation around different cultures. "Leave it to Severus to use food as a way to teach us something," Harry said, nudging Draco. "But of course he would," Draco responded with a smirk. "But if it's this delicious each time, I can't say I mind." "What's the plan for tomorrow, Severus?" Harry asked. "You shall have to wait and see." Severus smiled at the matching put-out expressions on the two teens' faces. It made them look much younger than their ages. "Oh man, but I am full," Harry said. "Shall we forgo tea today?" "No way," the potion master chuckled. He made sure to give them very small tasting sizes of the Indian desserts when they sat down in his office later that night. The next day began with breakfast, and then the boys went out flying around the pitch. The grounds were enchanted to keep out the winter weather when desired. For now, it was tuned to be late springerly summer, a very pleasant 68 degrees. Breakfast had made it clear that today was Japanese cuisine day. As such, they had an interesting breakfast of some white rice, miso soup, pickles, salted fish, salad, and natto fermented soybeans. It honestly wasn't their favorite, but they were interested to see what else Japan had in store for them. Mid-morning, Severus had them meet him at the Japanese tea house. This time, he informed them they would be experiencing a Japanese tea ceremony. "When did you have the chance to learn this, Severus?" Draco asked, as his godfather skillfully whisked the matcha for each of them until it frothed, instructing them to take small sips of the bitter drink. I've had some time to myself these years, Severus said. Or did you imagine I spent all of my free time in the potions lab? He looked at them, one eyebrow raised. Kind of, yeah, Harry muttered. Surprisingly, the potions master chuckled. He actually laughed when he saw the looks on their faces at their first sip of the bright green frothy drink. It is bitter, yes. That's why it is typically enjoyed with something sweet to accompany it. He pushed over a small plate of sweets. This is warabamachi. The coating is kanako, essentially sweet chestnut. This is a manju filled with sweet red bean or anko, and this is rakugan, essentially just pure sugar mixed with flour. The boys tried little bites of the sweets and found that the pairing worked, and it was super relaxing to sit there in the tea house enjoying their tea and sweets, while the bamboo around them gently swayed in the breeze, the sun warming their faces. Severus then passed them some rice bowls with fillings which he called onigiri. Once finished, Severus turned to Draco. Draco, you've been asking for a while to see lilies in my private garden. If you would like, we can make our way over there now. Draco immediately perked up. The three wizards approached the threshold of the main accessible part of the grounds. To Draco's eyes, there was no indication that there was anything of interest past this point. The potions master held up one hand, and the space in front of them seemed to wiggle as if it were made of jelly. He raised his other hand and extended it towards Draco, closing his eyes and silently reciting a chant. He dropped his hands and Draco gasped. What had previously appeared as nondescript woods, extending out as far as he could see, was replaced by a bright clearing with a lush section of moss-covered rocks, a beautiful little babbling brook. The centerpiece of the space was the incredible ancient tree Draco had heard so much about. The Blonde approached the tree reverently. He reached out to touch it and suddenly felt enveloped in calming warmth, as if something were wrapping him in a warm hug. It reminded him strangely of his mother, but not. It just felt maternal in a general sense. Could it be? Was he feeling Harry's mother's presence here in this place? If it had meant a lot to her, she could have left an imprint of her magic there. Likely not enough for any sort of direct contact, but for the magic to be able to respond in a reflexive way to things its master would have felt strongly for, but if so, why would that loving presence extend its arms to him? "Hey, Mum," he heard Harry whisper, and the air seemed to shudder all around them. "I'm doing well. You don't need to worry about me anymore. Severus is making sure of that." There was definitely something reacting to the Gryffindor's words, but nothing actually materialized. Harry seemed satisfied with just one-sidedly conveying his news. So he was right, Draco marveled. He was glad for Harry to have this place where he could almost converse with his mother after all these years. It made him realize he wanted the same with his own. But how? A wizarding portrait, for instance. He hadn't been back to his manor since his parents' deaths, and with the place being compromised by Voldemort. But he suddenly was eager to get there as soon as was safe. He was certain his parents had had a portrait painted of themselves painted at some point would have to ask the elves. He was pulled from his thoughts by Harry's voice. "Draco, you okay?" "Of course," Draco waved him away. "Would you like to see more?" They spent a pleasant afternoon exploring every crevasse of the clearing, which was larger than Draco had originally realized. It was full of rare flowers, some of which he had never seen. And then Severus insisted they relax on the mossy ground and be led through a meditation session. While he felt like protesting at first, the strange magic of the garden was so relaxing that soon Draco found himself following suit. Finding his cares melting away, dinner that night was an incredible spread sashimi, beef and vegetable nabe, wild vegetable tempura with matcha salt, salmon skewers, and a number of other things Harry and Draco had never tried. Note there is also an array of comfort food in Japanese cuisine I have not shared. I will consider that for a different day. They left the traditional behind with dessert, yuzu tarts, and little light cookie sandwiches with matcha-flavored white chocolate inside. The next few days passed in much the same way, and were not so different from the time they spent at Prince Manor in the summer. They played board games, read, talked, experimented in the potions lab a few days after their arrival, Severus gave them a special lesson in the lab on the Prince family magic. Every ancient house had their speciality, he explained, and for the Prince line, that had always been potions. As such, those of the Prince line were historically skilled in the art. Severus taught them a number of potions over the next few days, and each time the boys were able to successfully craft them. There were all sorts, powerful healing potions, potions to be used in battle, illusion magic, droughts to affect the mind. It was only afterward that Harry understood the implications of this, and only then because Draco explained it. You do realize that these potions Severus is teaching us are Prince family secrets. For him to share them with you, and even more than that, the fact that they actually worked shows that the Prince family magic considers us worthy. Maybe it's the manor itself acknowledging us, or maybe it's something bigger. But in any case, the Prince magic is accepting us, Harry. Harry didn't know what to do with that information, but it made what felt like a huge bubble form in his chest. Of hope, happiness. In any case, he promised himself he would make sure to master any potions Severus taught them. He would show the wizard he was not about to take this gift for granted. On Christmas Day, the boys woke up early, and Harry noticed the enchantment to keep the grounds in everlasting spring had been dropped. Instead, the grounds were blanketed in layers of snow that continued as far as they could see. Good morning. Happy Christmas. Harry looked up and smiled at Severus, standing in the doorway to his bedroom. Happy Christmas, Severus. Breakfast is at its usual time, but today we shall take it in the family room. Be there soon. You don't want to keep our guests waiting. Guests, Harry thought. Harry knocked on Draco's bedroom door, and together they made their way downstairs. When they'd made their way down to the room, they saw in the center a stunning Christmas tree, probably 15 feet tall, give or take, and decorated top to bottom with ornaments and an array of amber, orange, and white lights that created a gradient, giving it the feel of a tree from an enchanted forest. Under the tree were presents, and sitting beside it, Remus, Tonks, Andromeda, and Ted is it. They all came over to greet the boys, grinning. I had no idea you would be here. Well, said Tonks, we missed you and couldn't stay away. But it was honestly Severus's idea to surprise you this way. The potions master seemed to be very engaged, cleaning his wand at that moment, determinedly not looking at any of them. For the next hour the group chatted while casually helping themselves to breakfast from the spread of scones with clotted cream and jam, eggs and croissants. Finally, it was time to open presents. Draco was like a little kid the way he raced forward immediately. Harry hung back, not having actually experienced the typical presents under the tree Christmas. He'd witnessed it plenty of times, of course, but the gifts had always all been for Dudley. Harry, what are you doing spacing out? Aren't you going to open yours? Draco was looking at him strangely, already having ripped open his own first gift, a large jar of cream called Metamorphmagus, friend, from Tonks. Just apply it like face cream, and you can mimic my abilities for a time. It works for about an hour, not from when you apply it, but from when you activate the magic. I've used it myself for insurance if I'm really tired, just to give me some more time if I slip while we're on a raid. This is great, Dora. Draco was grinning widely at his cousin, and Harry and Severus exchanged a glance, both fearing what the blonde was imagining using this for. Harry noticed Severus did not look altogether pleased and was shooting little glares at the Metamorphmagus. Be responsible with that, Draco. Do not use it to get into trouble. I know, Uncle Save. Don't worry, I will be very irresponsible. Come on, Harry. Oh, right. Harry made his way over to the tree finally, and then did notice that a good number of gifts were labeled HP. He grabbed one from Remus and opened it to find a book, Jane Ireby's Charlotte Bront. A present to me in my 5th year from Lily. I thought it would be better off with you. Harry opened the cover and immediately saw his mum's now somewhat familiar handwriting in green, sparkly lettering on the inside cover. He gently touched the letters with his thumb before paging through the beautiful collection, full of full-page woodblock print paintings. Might I take a look as well? Severus had come over and was peering over Harry's shoulder. Oh, Severus, you have a companion to this actually. Remus awkwardly passed Severus a gift of his own. Severus shot Remus a suspicious glance, but opened the package nonetheless to find two similar-looking books to Harry's copy of Jane Eyre. Wuthering Heightsby, Emily Bront and The Tenant of Wildfeld Holby and Bront. I thought perhaps you and Harry could share these. Actually, I truly thought they would be suitable as a gift to both of you, but these two felt more appropriate for you, Severus. The potions master nodded absently, himself tracing the letters of Lily's name in her own handwriting, a ghost of a smile on his face. Thank you, Lupin, he said eventually. Remus blinked in surprise. He and Severus had certainly made strides in their relationship, but for the potion master to thank him, it had been a risk to try giving Severus a gift that was so personal, but it seemed he had taken it well. Remus sighed in relief. Draco received a Black family heirloom from Andromeda, a signet ring, as well as a photo album. Draco, you are by blood the heir to the Black family. As such, this belongs to you. She turned to Harry. Actually, as Sirius Godson, you have some claim to that as well. You and Draco are essentially brothers in terms of how the Black family magic sees you. As such, the various heirlooms and magics will respond to you both. Harry nodded. Yeah, and Sirius did give me Grimold Placebot. I don't really want it. I wouldn't mind visiting, Draco commented. It has become a hair less depressing since Creature regained his purpose in life, Severus remarked dryly. Draco then turned to the album and opened it first to see pages upon pages of his Black ancestors. But then midway through, the faces became very familiar. A full page spread of his mum with Andromeda and Bellatrix when they were teens. Draco smiled back at his pictured mother, probably around 14, who gave him a knowing smile. The next page was a group photo of the three girls, still teens, with two boys, 9 and 7. Siri and Reg back when we were all close, Andromeda said softly. Those were the best times. They look so happy, Harry said, and Draco nodded. After a while, they pulled themselves away from the album. Harry, this is for you, and Draco, for you as well. Harry looked at Severus and took the gift with a small thanks, carefully opening the wrapping paper. Both he and Draco had received wand holsters in what looked to be extremely high-quality leather. These are dragonhide leather holsters that have powerful protection charms applied. As long as your wand is secured in these holsters, you will be fully protected from being disarmed. Thank you, Severus. Yes, thanks, Uncle Save, the potions master nodded. The guests stayed the whole day at Prince Manor, playing board games and sharing stories, relaxing by the large fireplace. Midday, Dora and Ted Tonks took the boys out for sledding in the yard, once they realized that neither boy had experienced it before. Draco had always thought of it as too improper, and Harry had never been allowed to touch Dudley's sled. An hour later, two pink-cheeked and happy 16-year-olds returned to the manor, ready to indulge in some hot cocoa. Remus would have followed them out, but he had been stopped by the smooth tones of the potions master. Lupin. A word. Oh, of course, Remus responded immediately and followed Severus out of the room and down the hallway. They descended a flight of stairs and entered an impressive potions laboratory. What is it, Severus? What did you want to talk to me about? Despite himself, Remus felt the old nerves returning at being alone with the man in what was strictly his own territory. The potions master did not respond, but disappeared into a storeroom. A few minutes later, he returned holding a vial filled with bright orange liquid. He returned to where Remus stood and set it down on the table in front of him. Wah, a new creation. I thought perhaps you would consent to testing it out for me. And what exactly is it? You may think of it as an improved formulation of the wolfsbane potion. Remus was immediately interested, though cautious. Improved how, exactly? Severus looked him in the eye. I said improved, but in truth it is a fully reworked potion with little in common with the wolfsbane potion as it exists today. This, he stated with visible pride, is Arcanite Arcanum. Ha! Remus waited for the man to continue. Unlike the wolfsbane potion with which you are familiar, this potion, if taken exactly as specified, will enable a werewolf to remain human, both in mind and form. What? Remus whispered, floored. How is that possible? Severus did not feel that warranted a response. But Severus, if this works, I don't know how I can ever thank you anew. Save it, Lupin. The potion is untested. You may save your gratitude until after the results have presented themselves. Even so, I wish to thank you anyway. For putting any time into developing this, and as complex as I am sure it is, it must have been a large amount of time indeed. Severus remained silent. I realize you didn't do it for me. At best, you surely wish to remove a potential hazard from Harry's and Draco's lives, given my relationship with the Tonks family, and that I'll hopefully be here to stay. He took a deep breath before continuing. But regardless, he looked up at the potion's master. This has the potential to completely change the projection of my life, and you are certainly well aware of that. I do appreciate it, immensely, even if it is not perfectly successful on its first go. At that, Severus' hackles went up, so Remus quickly said, though I fully expect it to be. This is truly brilliant, Severus. I will make sure to follow the directions exactly. Make sure you do so. I will. Another long moment of silence. Severus. Yes. The man's voice had a tinge of impatience. I know you do not like to revisit the past, but I wish to say all those years ago. I was a coward. I watched my friends treat you with cruelty, and I should have stopped it. I've spent 20 years pretending my silence wasn't a choice. It was. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. Severus stood up, smoothing his robes. The battle is coming, Lupin. I have no interest in your apologies for a past we cannot rewrite. I only require that you stay alive long enough to see the boy through to the end of it. Remus straightened his shoulders, a spark of the old marauder defiance meeting Severus's gaze. Then we have the same goal. Severus nodded, answer short, sharp, but final. Then perhaps, after the moon has passed and the Dark Lord is ash, we might find a better use for our time than nursing old wounds. Remus beamed a real, genuine Remus Lupin grin. I'll hold you to that. I hear the Prince Cellars have an excellent single malt. Don't push your luck, Wolf. Despite his words, Remus could see a slight smirk curling the potion's master's lips. Let us return. I fear to see what trouble the boys have gotten up to in my absence, not to mention your paramour. As it got late, Draco found himself sitting by the fire, feeling reflective. In some ways today had reminded the Slytherin of winter festivities with his parents, though in most ways the day had been completely different. He felt a sudden pang in his chest at the thought of his parents. He missed them, and there was something about the holidays that made their absence stand out even more than usual. He also felt a slight bit of guilt that his thoughts had not strayed to his parents more this year. He had been so occupied with all the goings-on that he hadn't given himself much of a chance to simply grieve. But sitting there staring into the fire, nursing his hot cocoa, he felt the loss of his parents very starkly. Draco, are you okay, Harry? Draco shrugged, I guess. Can I help? No, you most certainly can't help, he snapped and immediately regretted it. Sorry, Harry, I was thinking about my parents. I see. I know you hated them, so you don't have to try to comfort me. You prat, I care about you. And they were your parents. Of course you miss them, of course it's upsetting. From your perspective, it's a tragedy. My relationship with them really isn't important. I'm your friend, and I want you to know I'm here if you ever want to talk about bad stuff or good. Draco's mask broke. Thanks, Eno. You've shown me time and again that you'll be there for me and you don't judge. Sorry for getting defensive. If you only knew how many times I've gotten the same way. I'm pretty sure I already do. Fair enough. But Draco, I'm here as a sounding board if you ever need someone to just listen, okay? Arcuel, then it's just not fair, he suddenly burst out. Do you know that right before that final mission that killed them, I overheard father and mother speaking, and they were actually discussing if there was any way to part ways with the Dark Lord. They wanted out. They just didn't know how to go about it. I think a lot of it was their worry for me. They didn't want the life of a Death Eater servant who really and truly loved me. Draco's voice cracked. I think no. I know that's why I threw myself into creating that potion. It wasn't just for Severus. It was for the memory of my parents. If only I had gotten it done a little earlier, then maybe they would have been able to defect like Theo and Blaze's parents. It honestly hurts to think about. Harry listened intently. You know, Draco, I know for a fact that those beyond the veil can check on us from time to time. What you've achieved since they died, I would bet they know about it, and I'm sure they are so proud of you. They are rooting for your happiness and want nothing more than to see you do well. And think, they were trying to figure out a way around your becoming a Death Eater. And now you are totally and completely off of that path. I'm sure that gives them an enormous measure of happiness. It doesn't please me that their deaths is what got me off of that path, Draco said darkly. No, of course not. And I am sure if they had survived, they would have found their own way to get you there. But in any case, the fact that you are doing well has got to make them happy and at peace. Because they love you and will love you forever. Suddenly, both boys gasped at a strange feeling, at first as if they couldn't breathe, but then that released to be replaced by a different sensation, both cold and warm at the same time, that enveloped them both. It released Harry quickly, but held Draco for nearly a minute. Father, mother, Draco whispered in shock. A squeeze. So Potter was right, another squeeze. Draco smiled a genuine smile and felt his chest fill with extreme contentment all of a sudden. Not sure we'll have another chance, so please know, I will make you proud. I will uphold our name. I will become the kind of wizard you would be proud to be your son and heir. A strange feeling went through Draco, almost as if the presence was telling him these things weren't of central importance, if he was reading this strange, ghostly communication right. I am happy, and I promise you I will continue to find and fight for my happiness. With that, he felt enveloped once again by what he now recognized fully as a hug, and a feeling of intense approval flowed through him. He began to tear up as he felt the presence start to fade. Thank you for visiting. I love you both and will see you again someday, but I will try to ensure I am as gray and wrinkly as possible when that day comes. With a last sweeping feeling, the presence was gone. Harry and Draco stared at each other for a long while after that, confirming to one another that yes, that really did just happen. See, said Harry in an obnoxious voice. Shut it, Potter, said Draco, and then he burst into laughter. Things would be fine now. He was sure of it. Thanks for reading. Chapter 36. His Downfall. Chapter 36. His downfall. For months, the Order of the Phoenix had appeared to lie low, but the truth couldn't have been more different. While slowly whittling away at Voldemort's forces, they had been tracking his movements and his daily routine, until they were certain they had an awareness of when exactly he would be most vulnerable. They had determined how to deactivate the wards around Voldemort's hideout, using complex rune magic that Professor Babbling, a newly welcomed Order member, was instrumental in creating. Simultaneously, the potion Severus had made for Remus turned out to be incredibly effective much so that Remus had begun distributing it to the werewolf population writ large. It was a silent blow to Voldemort. If he called for reinforcements, his beasts would not be there. True to his word, Severus had kept the younger generation out of the war planning. He and Albus had worked with Moody to ensure the ministry was involved carefully, in a way that would not let any messages leak back to the Dark Lord. Albus had built an army of his own, and when they finally had their opening, they took it. The attack was swift and efficient. A large group of the ministry's highest-level auras, former Death Eaters seeking penance, and werewolves no longer chained by their condition, apparated directly into the hideout. They took out the Death Eaters in attendance instantly. When Voldemort summoned the rest of his followers, those who arrived were met not by a victory, but by a waiting line of auras ready to ship them to Azkaban. Severus and Remus moved through the fray as a unified front. As the Inferi surged, A stray curse from a panicked aura clipped Remus's shoulder, sending him stumbling. Severus didn't think. He simply stepped over the fallen werewolf, his shield charm snapping into place with a roar of power that shook the stone floor. He held the line alone for the 3 seconds it took Remus to find his feet. When Remus stood, he placed a steadying hand on Severus's shoulder a brief, grounding touch before they turned as one to face the Dark Lord. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Back at Hogwarts, the stay-put order had lasted less than an hour. Harry and Draco had slipped through the tunnels, and though they hadn't joined the main assault, they arrived at the perimeter of the hideout just as the chaos peaked. "He'll kill us for this," Draco whispered, though he was already uncapping a vile off-illusion mist. "Only if we fail," Harry replied, grabbing his invisibility cloak. As a wave of Death Eaters attempted to flank the order, Draco smashed his vial into the wind. The Prince Magic, recognizing its heirs, billowed into a massive shroud that created a dozen shimmering copies of every order member. Harry followed with the congealing draft, turning the ground beneath the Death Eaters into a viscous trap that ignored the order but snagged the boots of the Dark Wizards. From his position in the center of the room, Severus caught a glimpse of the gold and silver mists. He didn't have to look to know who was responsible. His heart hammered against his ribshaft in fury, half in a strange, fierce pride. The Prince Magic had accepted them, and they were using it to hold the line. That left only the Dark Lord himself and Nagini. Severus took the snake. As a Horcrux, it could not be killed by normal means, but Severus wasn't a normal wizard. His control of fiendfire was by now something to behold. Remus and Tonks stayed in the wings to provide cover, but Severus took Nagini out in less than a minute. He completely ignored the Horcrux's attempts to slow him down with ghostly images of Lily and Regulus. Those ghosts had already been laid to rest, thanks to 2 very special young men. The 3 quickly joined Albus in the next room, where Voldemort was maintaining a massive Inferi army while going head-to-head with Dumbledore. The appearance of Severus and Theo's father, Dorian Nott, momentarily distracted the Dark Lord. Feeling like toying with the man and getting a little bit of justice for his old friend, Severus revealed the broken locket that had once been a Horcrux. "I just thought you should know that Regulus Black did not die in vain," he said loudly. "He took a piece of you with him. It did the trick." The Dark Lord became manic, his movements jagged and desperate. In his rage, he threw a killing curse that lacked its usual cold precision. It struck Albus's powerful rebounding charm and snapped back directly into Voldemort's own heart. Suddenly, the room was utterly silent. Albus cast several spells to confirm the wizard was well and truly dead. Finally, he looked up, grimly satisfied. "I do believe it is over." Severus found himself mute and weak-kneed. He felt arms around Himramus, and Tonks and saw the blurry faces of the auras. Then he saw Harry and Draco standing in the doorway, soot-stained and breathing hard, looking terrified that he was going to hex them for leaving the school. Severus didn't hex them. He didn't even yell. He simply breathed a very deep sigh of relief and let himself sink down to the ground, his eyes finding Harry's. "Lily," he whispered, so low only the air could hear. "You are avenged." In the aftermath of the battle, a number of things changed, some significantly. Severus submitted the evidence he had gathered back in the summer, which turned out to be more than sufficient to bring Dolor's Umbridge in for questioning. After a short and humiliating trial, the incompetent, evil witch was taken away, kicking and screaming, to Azkaban. This sent shockwaves around the ministry, and many called for change. In this state, the ministry was open to considering different voices, and the consultation of the heroes who had so recently freed them from the threat of Voldemort carried particular weight. As a result, the Death Eaters in Azkaban were given another trial, this time with Veritaserum provided by Severus Snape, to determine if they were truly a danger to society, irredeemably so, or if, had they had the chance, they would have left the Dark Lord's flock to lead normal lives. This questioning led to the sentencing of some, the Lestranges, most notably to the Dementor's kiss. and it led to some being given shortened sentences, with hopes of leading normal lives if their exit interviews, again, to be conducted with veritaserum, proved them to be truly on the right side. This had several effects. It led to a rise in positive sentiment and morale among the most traditional, hardline, pureblood wizards, who to that point had been supportive of Voldemort's politics, even if not of his methods. But several steps, starting with this, began to erode the wall between wizards who had traditionally been thought of as dark versus light. As such, more moderate wizards began to come out of the woodwork, and the dynamics became less polarized and overall calm. This led to something like a public mirror of the impact Draco and Harry's relationship had had on the overall relationships between the houses at Hogwarts. Suddenly, it was no longer taboo for light and dark wizards to get along, for traditional purebloods to engage in conversation with Muggle spawns or enjoyment of Muggle arts and literature. This didn't happen overnight, but even as early as 3 months after the Dark Lord's demise in January, the political dynamics of the wizarding world had already shifted. At Hogwarts, the effects were obvious. Almost as if the Slytherin students were coming out of a cave, little by little, they began to keep to themselves less and interact with more of the student body. By year-end, the student body was starting to question the importance of the sorting hat, as well as whether it was truly benign, if all it had ever done was to create division where it hadn't needed to exist. Once Slytherin came out of hiding, this was the general sentiment spreading throughout the school. Harry had taken Professor Babbling's offer to heart and had studied runes a good deal on the side. As such, when he took the exam come year-end, he was told he would be permitted to move to advanced runes into the class with Hermione, Draco, and Daphne for the following year. Any attacks by former Death Eater children were nowhere to be found. In fact, Parkinson, Crabbe, and Goyle were on good behavior the rest of the year. If anything, they looked cowed and could be seen to shoot envious glances at Harry and his friends from time to time. Despite the more welcoming dynamics at Hogwarts, Harry had his friends still made good use of the Room of Requirement, particularly as it could be used as whatever they needed, even a potions lab, on command. On one such afternoon, Fred and George were huddled over a bubbling, neon-pink concoction that was currently emitting a sound like a dying bagpipe. The rest of the group had already packed up, leaving just the twins and a certain blonde Slytherin with the room to themselves. "The delayed reaction is still off, George," Fred muttered, poking the brew with a long glass rod. "It's supposed to wait 10 minutes before the, audible component triggers." "Maybe more ginger root," George suggested, looking skeptical. Draco, who had been sitting nearby with a stack of arithmancy charts, didn't even look up from his parchment. "Ginger root would turn it into a corrosive, you idiots. You're trying to suspend a sound charm in a liquid base without a stabilizing agent." The twins turned as one, identical grins breaking across their faces. "Ah, our favorite potions prodigy weighs in," Fred chirped. "We were wondering when you'd stop pretending to be busy with real schoolwork and help us with the important stuff," George added. Draco finally looked up, closing his book with a definitive effort. He stood and drifted over, his eyes scanning their haphazard setup with a look of practiced, elegant disdain. "If you're going to do this, at least do it with some modicum of precision. You're using standard fluxweed when you need the powdered root of a shimmering mallow. It acts as a temporal anchor." He reached out, snatched George's stirrer, and made 2 sharp, rhythmic taps against the side of the cauldron. The bagpipe sound died instantly, replaced by a low, steady hum. "See, 10-minute delay, perfectly stabilized," Fred whistled. "Brilliant. You know, Draco, we've said it before, you've got a real head for the chaotic arts." "I have a head for results," Draco corrected, though his expression softened slightly. He lowered his voice, looking at the shimmering potion rather than the twins. "Look, I've seen your business plan. It's inspired, but your supply chain is a disaster. You're overpaying for ingredients that I can source through the Prince accounts for half the cost." The twins swapped a quick, sharp look. The joking atmosphere shifted into something more professional. "And why?" George asked slowly. "Would the heir to the Malfoy and Prince names want to put his weight behind a couple of Gryffindor pranksters?" Draco was silent for a moment, his fingers tracing the edge of the stone table. He thought of the heavy, dark history of the Malfoy name, weight of expectations that had almost crushed him. "Because the world has enough darkness," he said quietly. "And I think the Malfoy name has been associated with enough fear for one lifetime. I'd like to put my gold towards something that actually makes people laugh for a change." He looked up, his chin lifting with a touch of that familiar aristocratic pride. "I want a 30% stake. Silent for now. I'll provide the capital and the technical refinements to ensure your products don't actually maim anyone. You provide the Gryffindor flair." Fred extended a hand without a second's hesitation. A silent partner with a conscience and a private apothecary. "George, I think we've just found our secret weapon." Draco shook the hand, a small, genuine smirk finally returning. "Just don't expect me to wear a yellow suit, Fred. I have a reputation to maintain." A few weeks before the end of term, Harry received a note in a familiar looping purple ink. "Harry, would you mind meeting me in my office this afternoon, say 5 o'clock? The password is peanut brittle." And it had been a while since Harry had spoken with the headmaster directly. And frankly, after everything he had learned about the man's machinations of the year, he wasn't sure he felt totally comfortable with the idea any longer. But he pushed his hesitation aside and found himself at the foot of the staircase outside of the headmaster's door at 4:55. Harry spun around. It was Severus. "Sir, you're here too. I was not aware the headmaster was summoning you as well, but worry not, I will put an end to any harebrained schemes he tries to propose." Harry smiled and chuckled lightly. "Thanks, sir. But we don't even know what this is about. And I am afraid that is soon to change." They ascended the staircase together, Harry giving the password so Severus wouldn't have to. "Harry, Severus." The jovial tones welcomed them as soon as they arrived. "Hello, Professor Dumbledore," Harry said. A noise from his left, and Harry smiled, seeing it was Fox giving a greeting of his own. "Hey there, Fox. I haven't seen you in so long," Harry said, walking over to pet the phoenix, who looked very handsome at the moment. Once Harry had visited with the phoenix, the headmaster welcomed him and the potions master to take a seat. "What is this about, Albus?" "Several things, Severus. A great deal has happened this year since I assigned Harry to stay with you for the summer. I know you both were unsure of how this would go, but I am so very pleased to see it turned out better than I ever could have imagined. Not at first, and certainly no thanks to you. I realize it was rough in the beginning. However, what you both, as well as young Draco, have achieved despite the odds," he paused. "I am so proud of you both. You have achieved so much, and have shown me how wrong I was about a great many things. Harry, Severus, I owe you both an apology. As you have both rightly said, I was indeed a great part in the direction your lives have taken to this point. I thought it was necessary, despite the pain at times. I realize now you have shown me that I was wrong. And moving past your personal life, Sherry, you and young Mr. Malfoy have made such strides to mend the centuries-old divisions in this school in such a short time. It is something I never thought possible. I realize now I may have made matters worse in the past. I wish to change. I would like to change things for the better, following your example." Severus and Harry exchanged glances. "And how, precisely, do you plan to do that?" asked the potions master. "Good question, as always." "Well, I thought of burning the hat, Severus," Albus said, his blue eyes tired but clear as he looked at the ancient, patched headpiece on its shelf. "I thought of tearing down the banners and starting fresh, but people do not react well to having their history erased. They merely cling to the shadows of it." "Pragmatic of you, Albus," Severus drawled, though there was a rare note of respect in his voice. "A forced unity is merely a well-disguised war." "Precisely. We shall keep the colors, we shall keep the names. But we shall remove the teeth." Dumbledore turned to Harry. The students have already begun the work, sitting together, studying together. The hat is becoming a suggestion rather than a sentence. My final act as headmaster will be to ensure the rules of the school catch up to the hearts of its students. Final? Harry asked, stunned. Ah, yes. Did I not mention? I will be stepping down after the end of this year. Both Harry and Severus were stunned into silence. And who might I ask will take your place? I thought of asking you, my boy. Before Severus could protest, Albus continued. However, on second thought, I figured you may not altogether appreciate being brought into the spotlight quite so much. Therefore, as an alternative proposal, I plan to ask Minerva to take over as headmistress, but for you to be her vice-headmaster, as well as her consultant. To ensure things are kept fair, that biases do not come to a head ever again. I do believe you two have a good working relationship and are an appropriate foil of one another. You have integrity, and you have what it takes to oversee a new era at Hogwarts, not an era of division as I have, but something new that hears the voices of the students and sees what is truly needed. Well, my boy, what do you think? Severus was silent for a long while. Eventually, he looked at Harry and held the gaze for a long moment, those green eyes giving him the answer he needed. If he were to take the headmaster's offer, could he not be in just the right position to help protect what they had built? It is not altogether without merit. But Albus, are you sure? Don't you still have plenty to give as headmaster? Are you certain about stepping down? That is kind of you, Severus, but I do think I have quite overstayed my welcome. I just didn't realize it until it was almost too late. The truth is a large part of me wishes to remain as I am, but in the end, I care too much for the school and its students to guard my position here like a selfish king. I will step down because I see objectively it is for the better. So please, will you consider my offer? I will, Albus. Thank you. The old wizard visibly relaxed. That is all I ask. The rest of the year passed with a strange degree of peace. Some things stayed the same. Tea with Severus was a constant, though at times Remus would drop in these days. They continued to play Quidditch, which was more fun thanks to the fact that it was just Quidditch. No dodging murderous Death Eater's attacks. No evil plots to distract them. No weird injuries, just them up there, playing the game, for once able to just be kids. Before they knew it, the school year was over. It was the end of year feast. Dumbledore stood at the podium, his eyes bright. He motioned for Minerva and Severus to stand beside him. Effective as of today, I am stepping down, he announced suddenly and simply. There was utter silence from the room, which then broke into a cacophony of whispers. Once the noise settled down somewhat, the headmaster continued. Minerva McGonagall will take my place. Severus Snape will serve as her vice-principal. With this change, I have entrusted to them a commitment to a new way of thinking here at Hogwarts. We have learned this year that our strength lies not our differences, but in that about us which is human, that which we all share at our core. We will still have our houses. The hat will continue to sort students based on traits, as per tradition, but moving forward, your house will be your foundation, not your fence. Greatness is found in how you reach across the aisles, not in how high you build your walls. It has been a true honor to have been your headmaster all these years. I could not be prouder to have overseen the growth of so many wonderful young witches and wizards. He turned to his left. Minerva, would you like to say a few words? Once the initial speeches were done, and it was time to eat, a miraculous thing happened. For the first time since the school's founding, the tables were not isolated seas of green, purple, red, and yellow. While sure, green was most concentrated at the table of the snakes, there was a mixing of houses that had never been seen before. Hermione got up the nerve and walked over to Slytherin. As she approached, several students looked at her in surprise, but she didn't see any obvious animosity. Mind if I sit here? She said boldly to the dark-haired Slytherin in front of her. Theo's head spun around and his eyes widened. Hermione, of course not. He immediately hissed at his housemates to move down to make room, and Hermione took the place offered. I guess you really are a Gryffindor, Granger, said Millicent Bulstrode. It takes guts to walk over here and actually ask to sit with us. Do you have a problem with it? Not really, she shrugged. If you're coming over of your own volition, you clearly don't hate us anymore. So I couldn't care less. That seemed to be the general consensus amongst the Slytherins. Thanks for coming over, Theo said in low tones, giving Hermione's hand a squeeze. She squeezed his hand back. When they got to the station after promising visits with friends this summer, they located Severus. Everything is in order, I presume. At their confirmation of the affirmative, Severus continued, Excellent. Then let us be on our way. I hope you enjoyed it. I am fully aware I sped through Voldemort's defeat. It just isn't what I wanted to focus on in this story. Anywho, only one chapter to go. Thanks for reading 3. Chapter 37. A Place to Come To. Chapter 37. A Place to Come Home. Topolog, we made it. This was a labor of love I started back in 2012. 14 years later, it's finally done. Many thanks to all of my readers, those who just found this story, and those who have somehow stuck with it from the beginning. Truly, thank you. And I hope you enjoy the ending. It was their first evening back, and Severus, Draco, and Harry had just finished having tea. Draco was tired and had already gone up to bed. Harry, Severus called, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant as the boy made to follow Draco from the study. Yes, Severus. Do you have a moment? Oh, of course. Let's walk. Harry followed the man out the front door, wondering where they were going. Exactly, they walked down the front tree-lined walkway and turned towards the gardens. It was a warm summer night, and the gentle breeze felt great. Just walking out there was extremely relaxing. Finally, they came to a stop under the sakura trees, and Severus turned to Harry. There is something about which I would like to speak with you. Harry nodded. That much was obvious. It has been quite some time since you first set foot at Prince Manor. Of course, your early days were unpleasant, to put it mildly. A pause. That being said, I do like to think that our relationship has evolved significantly since then, and that you are not altogether unhappy here any longer. He trailed off. Harry really raised an eyebrow now. Was Severus nervous? This was so unlike him that it was almost funny. Which is to say, the man took a breath and continued, once he seemed to have collected himself. I would like to offer Prince Manor to you as a permanent home. That is not to say you are required to reside here at all times. On the contrary, I hope as an adult you will follow a path of your choosing and likewise go wherever that shall take you. However, it would give me some great measure of satisfaction, and indeed happiness, if you would consider this your home to return to whenever you wish. Harry stared at the man without saying anything for a good 10 seconds. He wasn't sure why this felt so surprising to him. After all, he had in truth come to see Prince Manor as a home already, but for Severus to make it official, to directly ask him to see it as his home, suddenly gave him permission to really feel that way. Because no matter how much he had wanted to, he couldn't really. He had always felt just a little bit like a guest in a place he loved. But if he knew he was in no danger of being asked to clear out a home, a real home, for the first time in his life. The smile on Harry's face started small but blossomed as he felt his chest might burst with happiness. Before he knew what he was doing, the boy had flung his arms around Severus in a tight hug. He didn't dare look up at the man's face. He just hugged him to express everything he was feeling that he didn't trust his voice to convey. And then he felt strong, surprisingly warm arms wrap around him as well. Harry had never felt so safe and cared for. He didn't know that he could think of the L word in the context of Severus and stubbornly batted any traitorous thoughts like that away. But it was a close thing, as the man who had so despised him put a strong hand on the back of his head, rubbing it gently before finally letting go. When Harry had the courage to finally look up, a small smile was tugging the corners of the professor's lips. I take it your answer is yes. Yes, that is it's yes, Harry managed. I am very glad to hear that. I hope you are aware, Harry, that I have come to care for you very much. In time, I hope to fully heal the wounds your past has cast you, to see you a whole and happy wizard. If I can have any part, no matter how small, in ensuring your happiness moving forward. It would make me very happy indeed. As you are likely aware, I have never considered myself capable of being a parental figure, and I had one of the worst fathers imaginable as a role model. I am not naturally paternal or particularly affectionate. I despise the idea of coddling. However, you should know that you and Draco are the closest I have ever and will ever have to sons of my own. That did it. It was like an arrow through the heart, a good arrow. As pleased as Harry had been a few minutes before, that feeling was surpassed by what he felt now. It was like being surrounded in a bubble of warmth. It almost felt like he couldn't breathe. As such, I promise you I will endeavor to always be there for you. If you are ever in need of anything, please do not hesitate to come to me. It does not matter how busy I am. If you are in need, just say the word. I will, Severus. Harry was surprised how strong his voice sounded as he looked the man straight in the eye, or as close as possible given that Harry was still over a good head shorter than the potion's master. And together they walked the long avenue back to the manor. Epilogue 4 years later, it was the night before Christmas celebrations. Severus sipped his tea waiting in anticipation by the warm hearth. Severus was just about to refill his cup when the telltale crack of apparition echoed through the foyer. He stood, smoothing his robes, as Harry stepped into the light of the hearth. "Severus, I'm home," he grinned. Severus looked the young man over. He looked happy and healthy, and seemed to have finally overcome the physical damage the Dursleys had done on his growth, thanks to all the nutritive potions Severus had insisted he take in the last few years. He was now almost as tall as Severus himself. As Harry moved to drop his rucksack, a flash of bright, emerald-green scales shimmered against his dark traveling cloak. Severus' eyes widened. A slender, curious-looking tree snake was draped comfortably around Harry's neck like a living scarf. As Harry approached, the snake nudged its snout against his jaw, and Harry let out a soft, rhythmic hiss. I know," Harry murmured in English, reaching up to scratch the serpent under its chin with a thumb. "We're here." "Stop complaining about the wind. I see you've brought a stowaway," Severus remarked, his eyebrow twitching upward. "Oh, this is Pip," Harry said easily, as if carrying a venomous reptile was as common as wearing a watch. He held out his arm, and the snake obligingly slid down to coil around his forearm, tasting the air with a flick of its tongue. Found him tangled in some netting near the greenhouses at the university. He's a bit of a drama queen, but he's great company when I'm stuck in the library until midnight. Harry gave the snake another affectionate nudge before stepping forward to embrace Severus. Pip, seemingly accustomed to the maneuver, simply tucked his head into the crook of Harry's elbow to avoid being squashed. He says the manor smells like old paper and expensive potions, Harry translated, pulling back with a laugh. I think he likes it. Severus looked down at the small creature, which was now staring back at him with unblinking golden eyes. I am honored, I'm sure, though I must insist he refrains from exploring the ingredient cabinets. I should hate to have to explain to Daphne why her boyfriend's familiar has turned various shades of neon purple. He's a good boy, Severus. I'll keep him out of the boomslang's skin, Harry promised, giving the snake a final, casual pat. Severus rolled his eyes. I suppose I should be thankful you were almost placed in Slytherin. Were you fully Gryffindor, you may have come home with a lion cub. This time it was Harry's turn to roll his eyes. Did Draco say when he'd be getting in? It shouldn't be long, but while we wait, come sit and tell me about the semester. Severus motioned to the large sofa before them. Harry grinned and plopped down comfortably on the couch, Severus taking a seat beside him with more decorum. Well, things are going great. Thesis coming along. Surprisingly, yeah, as you know it's cross-cutting, a combination of runes, potions, and some classical magical theory, so it was a pain to find the right advisor, but now I've gotten going, it's really fun. Before long, another crack sounded and Draco appeared, grinning widely. Bonjour à tous, Harry rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Don't tell me you'll be speaking French all break. Well, that's an idea. Forget I said anything. Hair Pip, Draco grinned, leaning over to stroke the little green snake who hissed appreciatively. I take it you are not surprised to find Harry equipped with this new addition. Nope, we've met, Draco remarked lightly. Deciding to take pity on the potion master, Draco continued. He was a participant at our most recent game night. Draco looked cross all of a sudden. And now Astoria wants one too, and is asking why only Daphne gets the boyfriend who speaks Parseltongue. Harry laughed, and Severus shook his head at their antics. They all took a seat and proceeded to share with their adopted father the highlights of what they'd gotten up to while away at school. They were both completing their degrees this year, Harry getting his degree in advanced runic magic, and Draco, who had decided to study in France at his mother's alma mater, alchemy. These days, when not at school, Draco split his time between Prince Manor and Malfoy Manor, which he had reclaimed soon after Voldemort's demise, making sure to first rid it of any hint of the evil wizard's presence. He had then wasted no time in getting the house elves to help him install a large portrait of his parents, which had been painted soon after their wedding. It now hung in the family room and was a great comfort to Draco, who had gotten his painted parents up to date on all the changes in the world. It had taken them a minute, but eventually they accepted all that Draco had told them. Andromeda had even come to pay the portrait a visit. Draco had given his aunt some privacy. Yes, it was just a painting of his mother. But even so, making amends with an imprint of her sister seemed to give his aunt some of the closure she had dearly wanted. Draco had even introduced them to Teddy, Remus, and Dora's 2-year-old metamorph magus son. Narcissa absolutely fawned over her little great-nephew, particularly when the boy changed his appearance to mimic the Malfoy features, as he did so readily thanks to playing with Draco so often. Draco had a busy life. Family and school aside, there was also the matter of his silent partnership with a certain very successful joke shop in Diagon Alley. Ah, Harry, don't let me forget. I need to drop by to see our favorite twin menaces this week. Apparently they have a new product that isn't selling well. Stands to reason they require a Slytherin's keen eye. You know, Draco, I've never been able to stop seeing you as one of them since the day you used Tonk's metamorph magus potion. Did you really have to toy with those kids' hearts like that? I thought you'd created a war for a few days there. It wasn't that bad. I was just trying to help give them a little needed push. Sure, sure. Severus sat back and nursed his tumbler, watching the guests enjoy the festivities. Harry was sitting with Daphne, lost in conversation while his snake familiar flicked its tongue about, clearly interested in the snacks on the table before him. Draco and Astoria, meanwhile, were sharing a cushy loveseat, Teddy Lupin in Draco's lap as the blonde read to him. Occasional peals of laughter would come from the toddler, and even Severus had to admit the sound wasn't altogether unpleasant. Having a baby metamorph magus seemed quite challenging, and the potion's master did not envy his fellow former order members. He watched as the child's hair turned platinum blonde, making him look like a Draco clone to such an extent that Severus felt some passing nostalgia. A few minutes later, the toddler let out a squeal of excitement as he noticed Pip and toddled over as fast as he could to pet the snake. Severus watched as Harry smiled and easily pulled Teddy into his lap, teaching him how to handle the snake gently. The little boy nodded seriously, apparently paying very close attention, and indeed his next attempt at stroking the serpent was much more to the animal's liking, given how it coiled around the child's arm, much to the shock and soon after glee of said child. May I join you? Be my guest. I bet it's nice to have a full house again. The silence has its benefits, though on the whole, I do admit to missing the presence of those two. Harry and Daphne are getting quite serious, aren't they? They are. My understanding is that they are waiting to pursue any next steps, however, until Harry finishes his degree. Daphne is touring this spring, as I imagined you are aware. Yes, we'll all be there to cheer her on. It really is amazing, the talent she has. I've heard it was in great part thanks to Harry's encouragement that she went for it. Harry is always his loved one's greatest advocate, so it is of no surprise. Remus nodded. And Draco, are he and Astoria close to tying the knot? He visits us a lot at Grimmauld, but always changes the subject when I broach the topic. And Creature, darn him, is so enamored of the young black heirs that he comes to cause a distraction whenever is convenient for Draco. The most I have been able to get out of them is that they wish to travel the world together for a few years first. Quite the travel bug Draco has. Something I'm afraid I can take some responsibility for. Oh. Ah, the World Cuisine Tour. The boys have mentioned that. Remus laughed at the sour look on Severus's face. So Creature fawns over Draco. He hadn't mentioned. Severus changed the subject. Oh yes, and Teddy too. The old house elf sees his having black blood as meaning he should be his own personal sworn master. Extent to which the elf loves helping with Teddy's care is appreciated, but I'm going to need to ask him to cool it. I don't want Teddy to be spoiled. With Draco as an uncle, it's a definite danger, Remus chuckled. And what of your plans? Remus, why all the questions? We see each other often enough at school and otherwise. It just seemed like the right time. They paused and sipped their drinks. It's been an adventure, hasn't it? Indeed, but why speak as if the adventure were over? Remus laughed. I know, I'm the one with the baby. I know something about new adventures. What shall we drink to this time? Severus asked as he refilled both their drinks. Our children, Lily. The good fortune that has enabled things to land this way, with Harry and Draco self-assured, brilliant, and happy young men with bright futures ahead of them. I am not opposed to drinking to all of it. We have plenty of whiskey after all. And with that, Severus just sat back to soak in the pure chaotic joy of having, yes, a family, marveling that such was possible for one such as him. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for reading this. It's by far the longest work I've ever written. And finished.